B'Shem HaShem na'aseh v'natzliach, Shiur Torah, Bruchim Habayim. We're back here, Baruch Hashem, starting a new week, starting a new month. BeEzrat HaShem na'aseh v'natzliach. Tonight's Shiur is going to be for the Refuah Shlema for our dear Rabbi Ephraim ben Shulamit, Rabbanit Sarah bat Anat, Hodaya bat Sarah, Rabbanit Levana bat Sarah, Sarah bat Sarah, Ovadia ben Levana, Sarah bat Levana, Ovadia ben Levana, Yosef ben Levana, Avi Mori David ben Nesria, Imi Morati Doris bat Jora, Naomi bat Sarah, Sarah bat Sarah, and all of Am Yisrael and all the righteous Noahides that continue to support our organization, continue to learn together with us, BeEzrat HaShem, and continue to publicize all of these shiurim. So just as a update for you guys in regards to the Kiruv store, I know that some of you have placed orders over the last few weeks and haven't gotten them yet. Of course, due to my health, there's been some back orders. We're going to, BeEzrat HaShem, do our best to try to catch up with everything this week, BeEzrat HaShem. Anyone that wants to continue helping us do everything that we're doing, all the free books, the USBs, all the wonderful things that the organization is doing, you could support by donating at bhtorah.org or at beezrathashem.org, or you could donate on YouTube, you could donate by sending us via mail. There's plenty of ways to do it, Baruch Hashem. Also, aside from that, to remind you guys that there's this book that you can buy online. It's not my store, but we saw this, we have this, and we loved it so much that when I spoke to the new business that was actually selling this new book by Rabbi Yosef that was translated to English, I told him that I would love to help him publicize this. And he was so excited to have our support, especially since he's a new business. He's giving all of our fans that buy this book, as well as the other Rav Ovadia books at his store, a 10% discount. It's ashkenazibooks.com. ashkenazibook.com. It's going to be on the screen, BeEzrat HaShem, when this video is on YouTube tomorrow. Also, we're continuing to give a bunch of free stuff every day by anyone that's in our WhatsApp groups and the WhatsApp page. So I highly recommend that you join. Free cups, free bags, free stuff just for fun, just for publicizing a Kadosh Baruch Hu's name. And last but not least is anyone that hasn't seen the videos that we publicized from our Bet Din in Israel, headed by Rav Yaakov Zamir, who's also the chief Dayan in Israel of the Bet Din Agadol, the biggest Bet Din in the world, and he also he's our Nasi of our Bet Din. It's also the Av Bet Din is Rav Ephraim Kachlon, our dear Rav. Our Rosh Kolel is Rav Shlomo Sharvit, who's also a Dayan, and of course the last Dayan is Rav Tzvi Didi. So all of them publicized this letter against the heretic Manis Friedman to make sure that everyone knows that it's forbidden to buy his books, sell his books, watch his lectures according to the Torah, as he violates the 13 principles of faith in multiple places. There was a video that publicized last week. There's another one that was publicized today, and there's going to be a couple of others later this week to make sure that the information is known to anyone that wants to know it. And of course, there's always going to be those that reject it, coming up with all types of silly comments. And unfortunately, some of them are even rabbis that contacted me saying, oh, listen, I don't think that you're doing the right thing. It's Lashon Hara. First and foremost, if you look at the Chafetz Chaim's laws of Lashon Hara, there is no Lashon Hara when it comes to publicizing heretics. In fact, it's the opposite. We are obligated to publicize and protest against heretics. And to say that it's Lashon Hara when it's a psak din from a bet din comprised of extraordinary Talmidei Chachamim, none other than the chief Dayan on planet Earth, as well as some of the extraordinary Talmidei Chachamim organization that between them have written between 50 and 100 books, about halacha. It's a silly thing to say. Obviously shows that they didn't really read the contents of the letter. They didn't investigate who the rabbis are. They just simply do not like to see anything that's going to, destroy their hero. Either way, it's important for people to know that, this is going to continue. We're going to do everything we possibly can to publicize that the warning. And whoever wants to listen will listen. Whoever doesn't want to listen, damam biyadam. Their blood is in their hands. Either way, we have this new series that we started last week, Baruch HaShem, series that is based on the foundational teachings of Chassidut. And this is a very important series, no less than any of the other ones we've ever done before. In fact, in some cases, it's even more. Specifically because of this point, having to do with this heretic Manis Friedman and his other heretic friends out there that claim that it's permitted to say that God has a body or has an arm or all types of other silly things that they make up which violate the Torah because it's so-called Chassidut. And you don't understand Chassidut. So you'll learn tonight a little bit more about what is real Chassidut, what it entails to be a Chassid, and in fact how you could actually do things that Chassidim do without necessarily the shtreimel and the rest of the garments of the Chassidim, or even calling yourself a Chassid. And you'll see that some of Gdolei Israel were very much Chassidim without the exterior that many people rely on. Now, one of the most important teachings of Chassidut is the teachings of Rabbi Elimelech of Lizhensk. As we discussed last week, Rabbi Elimelech was the third generation from the Baal Shem Tov. It was the Baal Shem Tov, his main Talmid, the Magid Mimezrich, and then the two main Talmidim of the Magid Mimezrich were Rabbi Elimelech of Lizhensk and his brother Rabbi Zusha. So we're talking about people that are the foundation of Chassidut. And in fact, the Tzetel Katan, this relatively short Sefer or letter by Rabbi Elimelech of Lizhensk is considered one of the most profound and foundational teachings of Chassidut. So meaning that anyone in the world today that wants to become familiar with Chassidut, perhaps even practice Chassidut, these are the foundational teachings that you have to know, and perhaps even aspire to fulfill some or all of them if you can. Now, one of the interesting things that many people are unaware of in our generation, especially since history of our nation, although it's a very more well documented or better documented than any other history in mankind, unfortunately the current generation is very ignorant of our history, and especially what's happened to us over the last few hundred years, when people that are familiar with that history hear about the so-called partnerships between Jewish people and the church, or Jewish people and Christian organizations, like what they like to call the Judeo-Christian partnerships, their skin crawls. Why? Because all they could think of is what happened to us in the last few hundred years in the hand of the Christian church. And one of the main things that happened over the last few hundred years is the Spanish Inquisition, the Crusades, and literally the murder of millions of Jews throughout all of Europe and other parts of the world because we were Jews, and the only way for a person to save their flesh was by converting to Christianity. Now, the most horrible way that the Jewish people would be killed would be by burning at the stake. Simply, trying to tell the precious Jewish person to convert to idolatry, to convert to Christianity and believe that, God is a man, God has three parts, sort of like following Manis Friedman, if you will. And if not, they'd simply burn you. And not just burn you, but do it in a public forum, in a celebration, in a party, and put, tie them to a stick, and then just literally burn people alive. This is something that happened literally in the tens of thousands and on a daily basis throughout all parts of Europe and different parts of the world. for hundreds of years. Now, many people are unfamiliar with this. I would highly recommend people look into this if you want to get something that's not just history, but also like a story that's going to make it a little bit more fluid and easier to learn for some people that are very new and also like non-fiction books. You could buy the book, the Murano Prince, which is part of a series that I told you guys is a very interesting and very good series to learn from. Not just the entertaining story, but Jewish history is in that book. And over there, you see some really realistic, gruesome scenes that actually happened. That actually happened, but not once and not twice, but literally thousands and thousands of times, of how Jewish people were killed in horrible ways because they didn't want to convert to Christianity. Now, as horrible as that may be, what most people don't realize is that all of this was bad, but as far as what happened to our people, but on a spiritual perspective, it was also a time where many tzadikim sanctified HaKadosh Baruch Hu's name in the highest way you could possibly do, just like Rabbi Akiva, when he got killed, along with the other 10 martyrs, when they got killed in a horrible way because they were Jewish, they sanctified HaKadosh Baruch Hu's name because they did not abandon their belief in HaShem. They did not abandon their publicity of their belief in HaShem, no matter what, even if it cost them their life, which it did cost their life in a way that's unimaginable for most people. And it was truly an opportunity to sanctify HaKadosh Baruch Hu's name. Now, while a person will say, okay, fine, it's a history, maybe I'll read it, maybe not. But then if we're going into this series already, the series of Chassidut, what one will find very interesting is that this is not just something you need to read about when you get a chance. In fact, what Rabbi Elimelech of Lizhensk starts off this Tzetel Katan, this small note, this foundational teaching of Chassidut, is that if you want to be a Chassid, you actually have to think about that particular situation, that horrible scene actually happening to you every single day. Now, why would somebody ever want to do that? In fact, how could that possibly help you become a Chassid? This and more is what we're going to learn today. But before we get into that, we also have to look at another perspective, another situation that happened. Another situation that happened, and of course, is a Kadosh Baruch Hu directs the world and everything in it. Of course, he puts our teachings in the weekly parasha every week already for nearly a decade. We see in Parashat Chukat one of the most extraordinarily baffling scenes in the Torah, where Am Yisrael complains after Miriam, the tzadikah, Miriam, the prophetess, dies and goes to Gan Eden, and the merit that she had is gone. And that merit was the reason why Am Yisrael had water throughout all of those years following them, coming from the stone. A river of water that the Gemara says was just like the man. Just like the man tasted like anything you wanted, so did the water. So you would have water and you would want it to taste like wine. It tasted like wine. You want it to taste like orange juice. It tasted like orange juice. You want it to be a milkshake. It tasted like a milkshake. Whatever you wanted that water to taste like, that was what happened with the water. Imagine having such a thing. Literally, you have anything you could possibly imagine without having to suffer any type of pain, without having to chase it, without having to buy it, without having to do anything. Just literally following you for years, for decades, 40 years in a desert. But now that Miriam has left the world, the water stopped. And Am Yisrael, of course, spearheaded by the Erev Rav that always starts the complaints, starts complaining, starts threatening Moshe Rabbeinu and Aaron. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells Moshe and Aaron, go back to the stone. And unlike the first time, where I told you to hit the stone and the water will come out, This time, speak to the stone. Speak to the stone. But the Gemara tells us that Moshe Rabbeinu went to the stone, but he went to the wrong stone. And therefore, when he spoke to it, it did not bring the water. So he hit it twice, and on the second time, due to his sanctity in himself, that stone actually started bringing the water out, even though it wasn't the right stone. And even though Am Yisrael was happy that they have their water again, HaKadosh Baruch Hu was not happy, and he tells Moshe Rabbeinu and Aaron in chapter 20, verse number 12, because you did not believe in me to sanctify me in the eyes of the children of Israel, therefore you will not bring this congregation to the land that I have given them. So you see here literally the punishment of all punishments, or at least it seems like at first look, given to Moshe Rabbeinu, Moshe our prophet, Moshe our rabbi, Moshe our leader. Our Moshe Rabbeinu is getting punished for what? For not sanctifying God's name, because he hit the stone instead of speaking to the stone. Where is the Kiddush Hashem? Why did this happen? These are some of the questions, BeEzrat Hashem, we will have to learn tonight, BeEzrat Hashem, in this Tzetel Katan. Now, Rabbi Elimelech of Lizhensk, for us to truly understand and grasp the magnitude of the teachings, we have to understand the magnitude of the teacher. But the teacher did not come from himself, of course. Rabbi Elimelech of Lizhensk was the son of tzadikim. He was born in the year 1717, according to the Gregorian calendar, 5477, in a little village in Galicia. His father was Rabbi Eliezer Lipa Lipman, and his mother was Miriam. They were both extraordinarily righteous people. They were successful, and they were very gracious to host all types of guests. And one time, they had these group of very poor people, beggars, come to their door, and they ended up hosting all of them. And one of these beggars was extraordinarily sick, not just poor, but sick in such a horrible way that he had infections all over his body. So much so that when they gave everyone the ability to wash the dust off themselves, to clean themselves up, not just feed them, not just give them some money, but also make them feel like people again. When it came to this poor beggar, he couldn't wash himself because it was so painful. And of course, the tzadikim helped him by washing parts of his skin with a sponge very carefully, to make sure that it doesn't hurt him, or at the very least hurts him the least possible, to clean this stranger, this beggar, who smells awful, who looks awful, who can never repay you in any way, or at least it seems like. And they washed him, and they cleaned him, no different than if it would be their own son. Can you imagine yourself doing such a thing? Well, after their stay, after their recuperation, the beggars were ready to head on their way. But before they left, the sick one among them wanted to give Rabbi Eliezer and Miriam, his wife, the Rabbanit, a blessing. And he gave them a blessing that would not make sense for many years, until they saw what really transpired. And the beggar told him, the reward for your kindness is that I bless you, that you will have a son that is just like me. Of course, Rabbi Eliezer and Miriam are baffled by this blessing, but they didn't say anything. Okay, someone gives you a blessing. Okay, but they didn't understand. But once their son was already speaking, and the beautiful Kedusha started coming out of his mouth, they knew that this poor beggar was not just any ordinary beggar, but rather a hidden tzaddik, perhaps even Eliyahu Navi. And that's one of the things that we see among many tzaddikim throughout history and even today. They hide themselves. They hide themselves in plain sight, and only those that are very close to them, those that learn from them, really benefit from seeing their righteousness. And there's a whole thing about why would they hide themselves, which we'll get into perhaps another day. Rabbi Elimelech of Lizhensk succeeded in an extraordinary way, gaining not only endless Torah knowledge and Kedusha, but literally being a miracle worker. The open miracles that were done through his hand, as the Kadosh Baruch Hu allowed him to perform, were similar in such a way that even at the time of the Tanaim, it would be impressive. Even at the time of the forefathers and Mount Sinai, it would be impressive. And this Tzadik Kadosh, Rabbi Elimelech, wrote this short note, what he called the Tzetel Katan, a short note, as an inspiration for a holy life. Meaning that if you want to live a holy life, a life of a Chassid, these are the instructions. And he starts as follows: Ele advarim asher ya'aseh otam ha'adam v'chai b'hem. B'kol et v'rega shehu panui min haTorah, ובפרט שהוא יושב בתה לבדו בחדר או שוכב על מיטתו ואינו יכול לישון, יהיה מערער במצוות עשה זו של ונקדשתי בתוך בני ישראל. וידמה בנפשו ויצייר במחשבתו כאילו אש גדול ונורא בוער לפניו, עד לב השמיים. והוא בשביל קדושת השם יתברך שובר את טבעו ומפיל את עצמו לאש על קידוש השם יתברך. ומחשבה טובה הקדוש ברוך הוא מצרפה למעשה, ונמצא שאינו שוכב ויושב בטל, רק מקיים מצוות עשה דאורייתא. Translation: whenever you are not studying Torah, especially when you are sitting idly, alone in your room, or lying on your bed, unable to sleep, you should have in mind the mitzvah that's in the Torah in the Sefer Vayikra, chapter 22, verse 32, in Parashat Emor, that says, I shall be sanctified among Bnei Israel. Imagine in your heart and picture in your mind that before you is a great and awful fire burning all the way to heaven, and you, in sanctification of God's holy name, overcome your natural fear and throw yourself into it. God will consider your good intentions as if you had actually done it. In this way, you are never merely lying or sitting around idly, but always engaged in fulfilling a positive mitzvah of the Torah. This, Rabotai, is how he begins the Tzetel Katan. We see from here that the ways of the Chassid are not like the ways of regular people, where usually when someone is teaching something, the typical way of doing it is you start from the small and you grow to the big. You start from something easy and you go to the more difficult. But the Tzetel Katan starts in quite a different way, telling you already the first message of Chasidut, which is, if you have the opportunity to take the whole pot, if you have the opportunity to be completely righteous, go for it. Don't just try to go along, get along, just a passing grade. If you have the ability to do more, rule number one of Chasidut, do more. Do more than what you are obligated to do. Do more than what you could even imagine yourself doing. Always aspire for more. Furthermore, we see that he starts off by telling us, Bekol et verega, which in English translates to whenever. But really there's a significance to the Hebrew language that we need to know, where he's telling us, Bekol et verega, meaning every moment. And the Gemara in Masechet Berachot in page 7a says, what is a rega? What is a moment? And the Gemara goes back and forth, explaining to us different verses that talk about a moment in the eyes of God. What is a moment? Because this is the lesson that one of the sources we learn from is from Bil'am HaRasha, where Bil'am knew when this moment is. There's a moment where Kadosh Baruch Hu passes judgment on the world. Whatever wrath has to come to this world each day, there's only one moment of the day that it happens. And because Bil'am HaRasha, as we'll learn in Parashat Balak next week, knew this moment, this would be the time when he would say his curses on whoever was the enemy, and the curses will be fulfilled, because there's already wrath coming to the world. It's as if there is a tsunami and the house is in the way. The Gemara asks, what is a moment? How long is a moment? The Chachamim teach us a moment, a rega, lasts as long as it takes you to say rega, meaning a moment. Now, Chachamim broke it down even further and arrived at 1/15,000 of a second. That's a rega. That's a moment. And Rabbi Elimelech says, in every moment that you're not learning Torah, you're not studying Torah. Why are you not studying Torah? Perhaps you're very tired, you're occupied with something that makes you incapable of learning Torah, you're not able to learn, whatever the reason is. If you want to be a Chassid, you have to take advantage of those moments. Especially when you are early on and far away from being a Chassid, but you aspire to be one. Take advantage of the easy times to take advantage of. Maybe you can't take advantage of every moment while you're working because your mind is on all types of things. Maybe you can't take advantage of the moment that passes through the day, where many times people like to tell people how busy they are and pretend to be busy, but somehow they have time to go out to the store and get some ice cream. Somehow they have time to go buy themselves some new music. Somehow they have time to watch all types of nonsense on the internet. Somehow they have time for all of these things. But if you tell them, can you do me a favor and help me? Oh, no, I'm really, really busy. They don't have any time. They have time for other things that are unnecessary. But for things that are important for other people, they're very busy. Now, of course, if a person manages their time very carefully, they'll have to learn how to take advantage of their moments. But in the beginning, you can't go from being a regular person to being a Rav Yashiv, to being a Rav Ovadia, to being a Gedol Hador that literally counted the moments. So Rabbi Elimelech gives us an easy way. When you're sitting idly alone in your room, you're not doing anything. You're not busy with work. You're not busy with family. You're not busy with anything. You're just doing nothing. There's nothing to do, even if it's 5 minutes. Usually, people that smoke have a lot of that. I remember when I was smoking cigarettes back in my Wall Street days, you go to step away from the office, think, talk, whatever it is. You want to go away. What do? Go outside. Whether it's cold, hot, doesn't make a difference. Somehow, you're on 5 minutes off. So you go, you burn 5 minutes. You burn 5 minutes, and 5 minutes here and 5 minutes there. If you pack, you smoke a pack a day, you burned 100 minutes. 100 minutes, talking about almost 2 hours. So people burn a lot of time. They burn a lot of time. Those types of moments, we have nothing to do. You're just scrolling to the internet, trying to look for something interesting. Nothing to do. Your class just finished, or the assignment you were working on, or the activity you were doing just completed, and the next one that's coming up is another 20 minutes. Meaning you have nothing to do for that window of 20 minutes. You have nothing to do for the window of 10 minutes, a half hour, an hour. That time. Or better yet, you're lying on your bed, says Rabbi Elimelech, unable to sleep. Do you ever have that? Who didn't? You're just sitting there, trying to go to sleep. You're exhausted, but you can't go to sleep. So much on your mind, so much you have to do. All of a sudden, all the things that you forgot about today, suddenly you remember them. All the things you have to do tomorrow, somehow all of the to-do list becomes priority. All of a sudden, you're thinking about things that you forgot about, and you can't sleep. During that time that you're sitting there, doing nothing. Says Rabbi Elimelech, you should have at that moment in your mind the mitzvah that's mentioned in our Torah that obligates us to sanctify HaKadosh Baruch Hu's name, to sanctify Hashem's name. That's what you should have in your mind. Now, Rabbi Elimelech did not invent this mitzvah. This is a mitzvah from the Torah. And who is better than Rabbeinu the Rambam to learn the mitzvot? In his Sefer HaMitzvot, positive mitzvah number 9, meaning this is right off the bat. When you open the Sefer HaMitzvot, you're going to see the mitzvot of the Torah. You have the positive mitzvot, the negative mitzvot. The ones that you have to do, the ones you have to stay away from. Now in mitzvah number 8, the Rambam tells us we have an obligation to emulate Hashem. Be like Hashem. Just like Hashem is merciful, you be merciful. He's gracious, you be gracious. He's righteous, you be righteous. He is saintly, you be saintly. Try to emulate the character traits of Hashem. This is the reason why the Torah uses human language in the Torah, not because God has an arm, or he gets angry, or he loves, but rather because these are lessons he's trying to teach us of how we should be. Because from our limited human perspective, this is how we would interpret this action. This action comes from anger. This action comes from love. This action comes from mercy. This action comes through a strong arm. It is not in any way, shape, or form, an insinuation that God actually has these feelings or he has an arm. As the Rambam tells us multiple times in the commentary on the Mishnah in Masechet Sanhedrin, Perek Chelek, in Ilchot Shuvah, in Ilchot Yesodei Torah, chapter 3, Halacha number 7. It is not because God has these traits, but rather this is what he wants us to learn from his action. And from our limited human perspective, this is how our mind would be able to interpret such an action. Such an action, in our mind, would be as a result of anger. Such an action would be as a result of love, mercy, and so on. So we have a commandment from the Torah to emulate Hashem. And mitzvah number 9, that the Tzetel Katan mentions, the Rambam tells us, this is a positive commandment from the Torah to sanctify the name of God. This is what God said in the Torah, in the book of Leviticus, chapter 22, verse 32. And I shall be sanctified in the midst of the children of Israel. Now, interestingly, if you look at the mitzvah, the verse itself, the full verse, you will see that actually there are 2 mitzvot over there. Where once the Torah tells us to sanctify, but before he tells us to sanctify, it says, you shall not desecrate my holy name. Rather, I should be sanctified among the children of Israel. I am HaShem who sanctifies you. So here, Torah gives us one of the many examples of how we're not only obligated to do good, but even before we do good, we have to steer away from bad, not to desecrate God's name. Sur mera v'aseh tov. Stay away from evil and do good. You can't just do good while doing evil, because you'll still stay evil. If you want to be good, the first thing you need to learn how to do is stop doing bad things. If you're a Jew, you're obligated to keep all of the mitzvot. Among them is observing Shabbat. That means you have to observe Shabbat. Can't drive on Shabbat. Can't work on Shabbat. Can't even discuss work on Shabbat. You have to arrive to Shabbat as if all of your dealings are handled and there's no worries in the world. Because if you carry your worries into Shabbat, you're not able to enjoy Shabbat. And you're forsaking the Onik Shabbat. You're not really observing Shabbat properly. So a person has to learn how to stay away from desecrating God's name. As the Gemara in Masechet Yoma, page 86, tells us that there are certain sins that a person can simply say, I'm sorry to HaShem, and he'll be forgiven. There are other higher category of sins where saying I'm sorry is not enough. He has to wait until Yom Kippur for HaShem to forgive him. And then there are sins that are even higher level, where a person has to suffer in this world. Even after saying I'm sorry, even after Yom Kippur, they have to suffer in this world in order for that sin to be rectified. But then there is the highest level of sin where a person can say I'm sorry, can go through Yom Kippur for 50 years, can even suffer in this world, but it will not be rectified until he dies. And that is the sin of Chilul Hashem, of desecrating God's name. And a person has to be careful to never desecrate God's name. And really the way to fix desecrating God's name, says Rabbeinu Yonah, over 700 years ago, is by doing Kiddush Hashem. Doing Kiddush Hashem, sanctifying God's name. Exactly the mitzvah that the Rambam is telling us. We have an obligation to sanctify God's name. One of the ways of doing it, says the Rambam, the idea of this commandment is that we are commanded to publicize this true Jewish faith that believes in one God and should not fear that anyone will harm them in consequence of doing so. See, here the Rambam is telling us that it's not enough to just be Jewish. You have to publicize your Judaism. You have to publicize your belief in one God, your belief in the mitzvot, your belief in the Torah. Publicize it. Be proud of it. Furthermore, if you see someone is going against Judaism, violating the 13 principles of faith, preaching heresy, you have an obligation to publicize their heresy. That's part of sanctifying God's name. You can't just sit there idly doing nothing. You have an obligation to sanctify God's name. Sanctify your beliefs that are contrary to the heretic's belief. Now, what if a person says, yeah, but if I share your lectures, people say bad things about me, maybe they'll kick me out of yeshiva, maybe they'll kick me out of the community, maybe they're not going to want to talk to me, maybe this, maybe that. Says the Rambam, if you want to fulfill this mitzvah of Kiddush Hashem, And in fact, if you do not want to violate this mitzvah, you have to not only publicize your belief in the Jewish faith and a belief in the one God, but you are not allowed to fear anyone other than God. You should not fear anyone. You should not fear anyone harming you. To what extent? To what extent? Says the Rambam. To the extent that if a tyrant would seek to coerce us and to deny the exalted one, some tyrant is trying to convince you to believe in Yoshke. Tells you, if you don't believe in Yoshke, we're going to do the Spanish Inquisition on you. We're going to burn you at the stake. If you don't convert to idolatry, we're going to kill this and kill that. Says the Rambam, one has to publicize his belief in the Torah, his belief in God, his belief in Judaism, to the extent where even if a tyrant would seek to coerce him, to deny the exalted one, we must not heed them. Rather, we should give our lives, meaning we should die not to deny God. We must not even let him, meaning the tyrant, we must not even let him receive the impression, even through an external gesture of acceptance, that we have denied God. Through our hearts, though our hearts are steadfast in the belief in an exalted one. This, by the way, highlights the mistake of the Marranos, and unfortunately others throughout history, other Jews throughout history, that when the evil decree was published by the government at the time, whether it be in Spain or in other countries, that decreed that the Jews have to either convert to Christianity or leave. Many of them left, but some did not want to leave because they had all of their money there. And when you left, you couldn't take your house, you couldn't take your money. You were leaving with the clothes on your back. Meaning you had 10 million in the bank, now nothing. Now nothing. Everybody left with nothing. Everybody literally was leaving with nothing. Everybody started from scratch. So many people didn't want to leave. How am I going to leave my business? I'm making $1 million a month. How am I going to leave my house? It's my life savings. How am I going to leave, all of these things? So, okay, well, the only way for you to stay is converting to Christianity. Yeah, but how could I convert to Christianity? I believe in one God, not three. How could I convert to Christianity? I believe in God has no body or the likeness of a body. You guys believe that he became a human. How could I believe in Christianity? It's considered idolatry. Well, buddy, if you want to stay, you have to convert to Christianity. So some of the people said, you know what? Let me just give them the impression that I believe in it. Tell them, yeah, I believe in this one, and the son, the prostitute, and the Ghostbusters. Sure, I believe in all that stuff. Sure, no problem. No problem. The bastard and the prostitute and all the spirits and the Ghostbusters, I believe in everything. Sure, no problem. We have a mitzvah to mock idolatry. Hence the reason why we're doing it in every lecture. Especially when they killed us for it. So now Rabotai Yekilim, person thought he fooled them. Why? He gave them the impression that he believes. HaKadosh Baruch Hu made sure that everyone knew he was not happy with this. Why? You are not allowed by any way to give anyone the impression that you do not believe in the Torah, while inside your heart you still believe. Many of the Marranos did this because they didn't want to leave. They didn't want to leave all these countries. So they pretended to be Christians, but then at home they still would practice their Judaism in a limited way. And to show how HaKadosh Baruch Hu was unhappy with all of this, many of them got caught and then burned at the stake in the most horrible, vicious way, tortures, terrible things. Says the Rambam, we're not allowed to ever fear anything happen to us, to such an extent where even if a tyrant would seek to coerce us, we must not even hint to such a person that we don't believe in the Torah. This commandment, says the Rambam, is referred to as Kiddush HaShem, sanctification of the name, which every Jew has been commanded. In other words, we must hand ourselves over to death at the hands of the tyrant in expression of our love of the Exalted One and in our belief in His oneness. Meaning, if you have only one way, either convert to idolatry or die, a Jew must die. And Rambam gives an example of what happened at the time of the Beit HaMikdash, where Nebuchadnezzar Rasha put a statue. He was king of every nation, where the prophet Daniel told him an interpretation of his dream that he will be the most powerful king in the world from his time until the Mashiach arrives. Once Mashiach arrives, of course, he will rule the whole world in a more powerful way than any other king in history. But nonetheless, until then, Nebuchadnezzar was gifted this because he fulfilled the mitzvah of tzedakah, feeding the poor. But needless to say, this Rasha, Nebuchadnezzar, was an idol worshiper, even though he believed in God. But he also believed in idolatry. He had an enormous statue built, and then through the use of huge magnets, he had the statue pulled in both directions or multiple directions at the same time that it looked like it was floating in the air. That's what the Midrash says. So this statue is enormous, size of a building, and it's flying in the air. And he said everyone has to bow to this statue. And the Rambam says that everyone was forced to bow down to this image, and all did, including the Jews, there being no one who would sanctify the name of heaven, which was a great shame for Israel. Why? Because you have not just the Gentiles, many of which were already idol worshippers, all of which were idol worshippers actually, because there was only idolatry and then there's Judaism. So for them to just add another idol, not a big deal. So you think, okay, so why don't all the Jews run away? Yeah, but when you saw the ceremony where literally millions of people are going back to the statue, you think, oh, everybody's doing it. So no one knows the Jews are there, they're doing it, they're not doing it. So tomorrow in the paper, the headline will be, everybody in the world bowed to Nebuchadnezzar's statue. So the tzadikim, the three friends of Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, knew the sanctification of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's name is absolutely necessary here. And they refused to bow to the statue and were thrown into the fire. And of course, HaKadosh Baruch Hu saved them, even though the prophet told them that he will not save them, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't want them to know that he's going to save them. He wanted them to really get the full reward for this mitzvah, being commemorated thousands of years later. And the Rambam tells us here that this mitzvah of publicizing our belief in HaKadosh Baruch Hu and not fearing anyone or anything other than HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that no one could hurt us for publicizing the truth, no one could hurt us for doing the will of HaShem, never fearing consequences, never being concerned of whether people will dislike, kill, arrested, doesn't make a difference. If they send you the police to the house, if they send you problems, they call the bank, their friend that works for the bank convinced the friend that works at the bank to give you some problems. All of a sudden, you leave the holiday, your bank is closed, your money is gone, you don't even have money to pay for food for nearly a month, you have no idea what happened. Can't fear any of those things. Why? You're publicizing the Kadosh Baruch Hu's name. You publicize the Kadosh Baruch Hu's name, eventually you will see how a Kadosh Baruch Hu rewards you like no other. Now, this is a mitzvah that is also connected to the next mitzvah, which is Kriyat Shema. The Kriyat Shema is mitzvah number 10. And we also see how the Tzetel Katan, Rabbi Elimelech of Lizhensk, is not just writing things out of his mind, he's actually connecting the mitzvot. We're emulating HaShem. We're sanctifying his name. And here we see Shema Yisrael. Why Shema Yisrael? Because we are also obligated to think about what the Tzetel Katan is saying during Shema Yisrael. As the Chachamim teach us, that when a person says the Shema Yisrael, and he's fulfilling that mitzvah, a biblical mitzvah, of saying the Shema Yisrael in the morning and at night, he has to imagine that he is jumping into a fire in order to sanctify Kadosh Baruch Hu's name. He is thrown into a fire to sanctify Kadosh Baruch Hu's name, never forsaking his beliefs, never going to idolatry, never going to heresy, no matter what. And the Tzetel Katan tells us that this mitzvah of sanctifying a Kadosh Baruch Hu's name should be constantly on a person's mind, where imagine yourself in your heart and picture an illustration in your mind, he says, that you are before a great and awful fire burning all the way to the heavens. I mean, this is some serious fire you're thinking about. This is a fire nothing survives in. And you, in sanctification of God's holy name, overcome your natural fear and throw yourself in it in order to sanctify God's name and not abandon his beliefs. Now, the Chacham Tzadik, Rav Daniel Parish, who wrote the famous Matok Midvash commentary on the Zohar Kadosh, before he publicized this very awesome writing, he was a teacher for children. And of course, these children grew up, many of them became tzadikim, rabbanim, avrachim, and even regular people that are in the work world but are very, very righteous people. And some of them told how they learned to withhold themselves from sins, to stay strong despite the tests. During those years when they were little kids, 6, 7, 8 years old, learning with Rav Daniel Parish, they said that once in a while, perhaps once a year, a few times a year, I don't know the exact times, but the rabbi would take the kids on a trip, on a field trip. They were going to the woods, all types of places, see kivrei tzadikim, all types of things. At some point, they're going into the woods. He takes some kerosene that he took with him and lights a fire, a little bonfire. All the kids are around it. Little kids, cute, tzadikim, precious neshamot, do not know what sin are. And he tells the kids, which one of you is willing to sanctify a Kadosh Baruch Hu's name by jumping into the fire? Of course, if the educational department would hear such a thing, they'd say, oh, they arrest the guy. But the rabbi was trying to teach them something. Which one of you is willing to jump into the fire in order to sanctify Hashem's name? As the kids are looking at this very passionate moment, one says, I'll do it. And then another one says, I'll do it. Another one says, I'll do it. And little by little, each one of them gets riled up. Yeah, I'm willing to do it. I'm willing to do it. I'm willing to do it. And the whole group of them are willing to do it. And by then already, Rav Daniel Parish made sure that the kerosene already died out and the fire died out, so nobody has to jump into the fire. But years later, these same children grew up and they said, those foundational teachings that we learned from the rabbi were what kept us strong through difficult situations when there were big tests. Because it was engraved into our heart, into our souls, that we are willing to jump into a fire in order to sanctify God's name. Now, the Bet Yosef, Rabbi Yosef Karo, Baal Shulchan Aruch, in the Sefer, Magid Mesharim, where it's, in essence, his journal, his diary, of his different teachings and conversations with the angel that would teach him, constantly discussed his lifelong dream to die on Kiddush Hashem by being burned at the stake, like the Spanish Inquisition. And he would constantly beg the angel to promise him that he will make sure that when he dies, he doesn't die a regular death, but rather dies on Kiddush Hashem. The Zera Shimshon, he brings the Rabbeinu Yonah that tells us that if somebody desecrated God's name, made the mistake of all mistakes by desecrating God's name, and he wants to fix it before he dies, as Rabbeinu Yonah says, you have to do Kiddush Hashem, do the opposite. But he explains, how does doing Kiddush Hashem undo the desecration of God's name? He says because the punishment for desecrating God's name is so big that there's not enough horrible things in this world to quantify it, to measure it, and therefore it is waiting for a person after he dies. But at the same token, the reward for Kiddush Hashem is so big that there's not enough good in this world. There's not enough good in this world, Rabotai, to quantify the reward for somebody that sanctified God's name. And therefore, as Rabbi Israel Misalant also clarifies in the Or Israel, when a person sanctifies God's name, he undoes one goes against the other. And as the Gemara in Masechet Yomah says that if a person does tshuva from fear of punishment, their intentional sins turn into accidental sins. Means they'll still get punished, but much less. But if they do tshuva from love, their intentional sins turn into mitzvot. Imagine, a person made 1.5 million sins, now he has 1.5 million mitzvot, without actually doing the mitzvot. But to do tshuva out of love, as Rabbi Nachman of Breslev, Alav Shalom, said nearly 200 years ago, it's not relevant to even the righteous people in his generation, except if you take advantage of the opportunity that the Zera Shimshon brings, which is to do kiruv. If you help people do tshuva, either directly, by teaching them, by giving them a USB, by giving them a book, by encouraging them, by inviting them to a lecture, by sending them a lecture, or by supporting it. Simply donating on a regular basis, not one time in your life. then guess what? If you make helping other people do tshuva, if you help other people do tshuva, you are now showing that you love God. And that is the highest expression of love of God, says the Zera Shimshon, that you could possibly have, which turns whatever your tshuva was at that point. You probably did tshuva because you were afraid. You didn't want more bad things to happen. You probably had some bad stuff happen to you. You don't want them to continue happening. So you started doing tshuva, started fixing your life. Just like most of us started doing tshuva because bad things were happening. We want to stop. We want God to help us. You want to turn that into a tshuva from love? Says the Zera Shimshon, do kiruv. Do kiruv, that turns your tshuva into a tshuva from love, meaning that all of your prior sins now turn into mitzvot. Why? Because you are now sanctifying God's name. You're sanctifying God's name. The reward for you supporting kiruv is unquantifiable in this world. You cannot measure it. Why? Because it's all considered Kiddush Hashem. And therefore, the Zohar Kadosh says somebody that makes kiruv their priority in life, they're always giving maaser or chomesh to kiruv, that's their priority in life, more than helping poor people, more than anything else. They make this their priority in life, even though they're working, they're an investment banker, they're a plumber, they're a mechanic, they're a consultant, they're a whatever, lawyer, whatever they are, but they make sure that they invest consistently into helping people do tshuva. They go up to Shamayim, Bet Din, they lived 120 years. They know they made some mistakes. They know they made some errors. But kiruv was their number one investment. Guess what? Zohar Kadosh says, there's no Bet Din. The Bet Din says, go, here's your special place in Gan Eden. They don't judge you. Now, of course, this is assuming the person is trying to do good things. He's not sinning regularly, violating Shabbat every week, but he thinks that he's going to buy Gan Eden with money. No. He's doing his best. She's doing her best to be righteous and investing in kiruv at the same time. There's no judgment in Shamayim. Why? Because it's considered Kiddush Hashem. It's considered Kedusha Hashem. Now, the Tzetel Katan, Rabbi Elimelech of Lizhensk, is saying you could even fulfill this mitzvah of Kiddush Hashem at other times. If you want to be a true Chassid, you could even fulfill this mitzvah of Kiddush Hashem even at other times. In fact, it doesn't cost you a penny. How? Every time you're sitting there idly, you're not doing anything, you're laying down in bed, you're sitting at your chair, in your office, your dinner table, you're waiting for the meal to come, whatever it is that you're doing. Imagine yourself being burned at the stake for the sake of God's name. Now, of course, a person could do this for 1 second, for 5 seconds, for a minute. And guess what? Says Rabbi Elimelech of Lizhensk, God will consider your good intention as if you had actually done it. Just like the Gemara in Masechet Kiddushin, page 40a says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves us so much, He's looking for ways to reward us. And therefore, you had a good thought, you want to do a good thing, you truly, truly want to do it, you tried it, you did whatever you could to fulfill it. HaKadosh Baruch Hu writes in your report card for life, you did it. Yeah, but no, I tried to give all of this tzedakah, but right before I gave it, the Amalek, IRS came and took all my money. Something bad happened. I lost everything. I tried to give everything. I wanted to give it, but I lost it. I had the money. I was going to give it to the rabbi right there and then. Before you know it, some muggers took everything from me. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, you had the plan, you had the intention, and I know what's in your heart, he says. In my book, for your life, there's a check mark. There's a check mark for that mitzvah. You fulfilled it. You fulfilled it. if a person thinks about dying on Kiddush Hashem, says the Gemara, which Rabbi Elimelech brings up, HaKadosh Baruch Hu considers it as if you just died on Kiddush Hashem. In this way, he says, you are never merely lying and sitting around idly, but always engaged in fulfilling a positive mitzvah in a Torah. Meaning, this is not just, okay, I sat there, I thought about it for a minute. It was a little bit difficult, especially when you start getting visuals, especially when you start thinking about what's going to happen to your body, especially when you think about the sad faces of people that love you. You start getting the visual, especially if you get good at it. Says Rabbi Elimelech, every second you are thinking of that you're dying on Kiddush Hashem, is a mitzvah from the Torah. It's not one mitzvah for 1 minute. It's not one mitzvah for 10 minutes. No, every second you think like that you're willing to die on Kiddush Hashem, is a mitzvah from the Torah. And that mitzvah from the Torah, just so you guys understand, if you took the words of the sages and gave an illustration to it, the sages say that the reward for a mitzvah, any mitzvah, is greater than anything else you have in this world. What does that mean? If a person lives an average life, 70 years, 80 years, you know what? Let's give him 90 years. A third of his life, he's sleeping. People on the average sleep 8 hours a day out of 24 hours. That's a third. So, third of his life he's sleeping. So out of 90 years, 30 years are gone. Another third of his life, he's taking care of business. He's working. Average person works 8 hours a day, or at least pretends like he's working 8 hours a day. So he's not exactly learning Torah. He's not exactly doing some great mitzvot. He's not praying. 8 hours. 30 years, another 30 years are gone. You have 30 years left. Out of the 30 years that are left, the rest of it, you have to take care of your life. You eat, you drink, you go to the bathroom, take a shower, spend some time with the family. Some of that time that's left is not exactly enjoyable. Some of it perhaps is enjoyable. But let's be generous and say that the entire 30 years that are left, are comprised of joy. Every joy you can possibly imagine. When he eats food, it's the best food. When he drinks a drink, it's the most tasty drink. He never gets sick. He never even has a cough. Nothing hurts. He's always healthy, pristine health. They use him as the modern day example of someone that is healthy. Not only that, everything he does is fun. Whatever he does, he walks, he enjoys. He runs, he enjoys. He lays down, he enjoys. He wants to play, he enjoys. His marriage is joyful. His kids are joyful. Everything is joyful. Just imagine 30 years of just joy. No. Let's imagine further. Not just one guy living such a hypothetical, unrealistic, joyful life, but an entire generation of people. Everyone in the world living this life where everything they do is like the greatest imagination. Everything is joyful. The food, the intimacy, the drinking, everything is joyful. 30 years that they live, that's not work, that's not sleeping, everything else is joyful. Entire generation. And you take the joy of all of them and you you put it in a box. Now that box has a lot of joy in it. I mean, that's a joy. That's extraordinary joy. It's not even something you can really quantify. But we're giving an illustration. If you put that joy and then you put it into a syringe, and you give somebody a shot with all of that joy at one time. I mean, that's going to be one happy guy. That's going to be one happy lady. If she got a syringe, if she got a shot with all of the generation's joy of 30 years of actual life in one shot, I mean, that's joy that you cannot even imagine. Now, if we take it a step further, if you take the joy of every single person that ever lived, the kings, the queens, the princes, the warriors, the bankers, the lawyers, the wicked people, the righteous, everybody that ever lived, from the beginning of the world all the way until the end of the world. We are now at year 5,784. You have nearly 6,000 years. Billions of people have lived. Imagine all of them have had joy every moment of their life. Not just one generation, but all of these generations. You take all of that joy and you put it in a box. You liquefy it, you put it in a syringe. You give somebody a shot with that joy. Now, one person getting all that joy and one shot for all of the people that ever existed. I mean, we said before, the one generation of joy, that's one happy camper. You can't say that about everybody's joy. That's happy. It's not enough. You have to come up with every possible adjective of good to quantify how happy this person is going to be, to have the joy that everyone has ever had in all of history. Says the sages, the Jewish sages tell us, Rabotai Karim, all of the joy that everyone has ever had from the beginning of the world until the end of the world is not even an ounce, not even a small amount of the joy that a Jew will receive for fulfilling one mitzvah in the Torah. Meaning, all of that joy that we just gave you an illustration for is not even a small down payment of what you will get for fulfilling one mitzvah in the Torah. Needless to say, the mitzvah of sanctifying HaKadosh Baruch Hu's name, which for that was what you were created for. As the Gemara tells us in multiple places, and Pirkei Avot mentions it as well, why did HaKadosh Baruch Hu create this world? In order to sanctify His name. So when you sanctify HaKadosh Baruch Hu's name, you are literally fulfilling the purpose of this world. In HaKadosh Baruch Hu's infinite parts that He has in this world, you as the small little part that He has in this world have decided from your free choice to do your job. You have now become a useful tool. You have now fulfilled your purpose. Imagine that. The reward for such a mitzvah is greater than all of the joy that everyone could ever possibly get in this world if you combined. And when a person thinks about Kiddush Hashem for 1 second, thinks about dying for the sake of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's name for 1 second, that's a mitzvah. 2 seconds, it's another mitzvah. 3 seconds, it's another mitzvah. 60 seconds, a whole minute, 60 mitzvahs. 10 minutes. 10 minutes, Rabotai Karim. He's thinking about dying in Kiddush Hashem. He's thinking of himself being tied to the wood, surrounded by pieces of wood. Fire is coming out. And he's happy saying, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Rabotai Karim. The joy that he will get is unquantifiable, even if he only did that for just 10 minutes in his mind. Why? HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves us so much, He will consider your good intention as if you have actually done it. As if you have actually done it. Now, Rabotai, the Noam Elimelech, also by Rabbi Elimelech of Lizhensk, tells us that a person should not want to die. Hashem is not looking for us to die. Rather, you should want to live on Kiddush Hashem. As the Lekutet Tfilot says, you should pray to HaKadosh Baruch Hu until you can vividly imagine various types of death and afflictions, until my senses are annulled and I can feel the very pain and suffering of death, as if I was dying for the sake of your great and holy name. Let there be no difference between my thoughts and my willingness to die and actual death itself, until I reach the point that I feel my soul is about to leave me. And I have to refrain from thinking a bit, so I don't want to actually die, because you, God forbid, you do not want me to die before my time. Because in your beneficent will, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, help me and teach me how to be truly ready to die with love for the sanctification of your name. And the Noam Elimelech says that at that moment, a person should actually imagine that he's sanctifying his life in order to affirm God's unity, because this is the path of tzadikim. And then the Bekuei Aviv says that with all of that, a person should realize that with all of the opportunities to sanctify Hashem's name, by dying for Him, living for Him, and sanctifying His name is even greater. It's even greater to sanctify your life for the sake of God and live with self-sacrifice, with mesirut nefesh, for the sake of God, is even greater than that. By you going and helping people do tshuva, you're sanctifying HaKadosh Baruch Hu's name even bigger. By you publicizing Torah, you're sanctifying HaKadosh Baruch Hu's name even more. Why? Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu does not desire the sacrifices. He doesn't want a person to kill himself or forfeit his life. HaKadosh Baruch Hu creates endless amount of souls each and every minute. So why would he want or need the soul of some sinner? Rather, HaKadosh Baruch Hu looks to find a precious person who will devote his whole heart and soul to him while he's alive. And at each and every moment, someone who refrains from indulging in a deep physical desire. That is bringing a sacrifice to God. By you living on Kiddush Hashem, that means that you have a desire to do something against the Torah. You saw something in your peripheral vision that's lo tzanua, that's not modest, and you don't look. You don't look. Something on the screen popped up. Lo tzanua. You shut off the screen right away. You look away. Lo tzanua. Your wife has a relative or a friend comes over to the house. Lo tzanua. You look away. Even if she's tzanua, you don't look. You look away. You see some delicious meal. It's not kosher. You're starving. Not eating it. Why? No kosher. Business opportunity. Make a fortune. Cheating people. You don't do it. Why? You need the money. You want the money. It's not kosher. By overcoming those desires to sin, you are living a life that's holy. And that's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants. Let the dying on Kiddush Hashem be in your mind. And you'll be rewarded as if you fulfilled it. And something even more extraordinary is by living on Kiddush Hashem, by literally sacrificing your day-to-day in order to honor Hashem's name by overcoming desires. And when a person studies Torah, they can push themselves beyond what they would normally push themselves, beyond what they think is even what they're able to do. They want to go, they see their friends are playing. but they still choose to learn more Torah. They see there's an opportunity to go do all types of things that sound like fun, but they stay learning Torah. They're tired, they're falling asleep on the book. They push themselves further to stay up longer in order to learn Torah. They got to a really difficult part of the Shas. They push themselves further to keep learning it a few more times until they understand it, or at least try. That's sanctifying a Kadosh Baruch Hu's name through your life. Through your life. Now, the Chafetz Chaim, who was not like people today that just call anyone a tzaddik. He would call this one Jew. There was a simple Jew, a Yehudi Kadosh, a holy Jew. It's one specific Jew. And this Jew was not a extraordinary Talmid Chacham or a big Baal Chesed. No, he was a simple Jew. And every time he would tell this story, he would get emotional and he would call him, what a holy Jew. What was so special about this Jew? This Jew was a regular Jew. But one day these Goyim decided that they are going to force this guy to convert and abandon Judaism. And usually they go after the people that look weak. And they threatened this Jew to convert to Christianity. And this Jew, although he wasn't a scholar, he wasn't someone that was well known, said absolutely not. And refused to even listen to anything they said. Eventually they put him to burn him at the stake, on stage, in front of everyone, cheering, looking forward to Jewish blood. And this Jew was already ready to die on Kiddush Hashem. Anytime they would speak to him, he would completely ignore anything and just look at the heavens, waiting to give his neshama back to a Kadosh Baruch Hu that created it. Completely ignoring anything that anyone was telling him, trying to get him out of it, he was ready. People are cheering, hungry for death. In the last moments, the Jewish people got a bunch of money together and bought his life back. And he was released. But from the trauma that he had, and it literally, his neshama was already ready to come out, he lost his ability to speak for the rest of his life. The Chafetz Chaim, every time he would say the story, he says, that is a Yehudi Kadosh, a holy Jew. That was a holy Jew. Now, Rabotai Karim, it may seem very far from us to think that this Inquisition and the things of the past centuries would happen to us. And BeEzrat Hashem will write that it won't happen to us. Even though the world at large seems like it's returning to the past with all the anti-Semitism that's in the world. Either way, a person should not only have this knowledge in the back of their mind, but they could literally live already as a holy Jew every single day and prepare their neshama to sanctify Kadosh Baruch Hu's name on a regular basis at any time that you have an opportunity to. Now I know this is not for everyone and perhaps not even for the vast majority of people that are watching this. But needless to say, anytime a person thinks about Chasidut, instead of thinking about the garments, instead of thinking about the accent, instead of thinking about all of the things that the superficial Chassidim that pretend to present Chassidut with, if a person really wants to know what Chassidut is all about, it starts with this: doing above and beyond what you're obligated to do. Meaning that if someone is doing the standard, obligatory mitzvot, good job. That doesn't make them a Chassid. if they're not even doing the minimum, certainly they're not a Chassid, no matter what they're wearing and what they're saying. If they're violating the mitzvot and teaching against the Torah, they're as far from Chassidut as you could ever possibly be. Because this is the foundation. Now, many of Gdolei Israel were Chassidim, even without being part of a Chassidut. Just because their Dat Torah was so superior to what a person could possibly get to, that if you simply read what they said, learn what they said, learn about their lives, you're seeing someone that didn't just become a Gadol in the Torah because they learned a lot. They didn't become a Gadol Ador because they have a good memory or their father is a big rabbi. Literally, you see that these people were giants because of their actions, because of their midot. Extraordinary story I heard just today from Rabbi Elimelech, who he himself heard it from the Baal Maaseh, the person that's in the story. The rabbi of the Yazdim, perhaps the most famous synagogue in the world, or at the very least in Israel, endless amount of Torah lectures are given there every single day for many, many years. Big schut to the tzadikim that built the place and literally set it up in such a fashion where literally there is Shiur Torah that get publicized in every corner of the world, one big rabbi after another. Now the rabbi of the Yazdim is Rav Yosef Shraga, Talmid Chacham, Tzadik. And he said that when he was much younger, they asked him to start giving a shiur. Start giving a shiur Torah. Now today, anybody that thinks that they know how to teach Torah, or they just like to hear themselves speak, or they want to become popular, or they want to pretend like they're righteous, they just start a YouTube channel, they start teaching Torah. Now, the truth is, Shulchan Aruch says that if you want to start teaching Torah, you have to get permission from your rabbi. Now you say, oh, I don't have a rabbi. Then you're not fit to teach Torah. Now, if I want to teach Torah, I have to ask permission from the rabbi. Well, if the rabbi says no, then you're not allowed to teach. Simple. That's Shulchan Aruch. That's Halacha. Now, of course, Rav Yosef Shraga, they asked him to teach Torah, but he has to get permission. Who does he go to? He goes to his rabbi, Rav Tzion Abba Shaul, one of the Gdolei Ador, the Chavruta of Rav Ovadia Yosef. And Rav Yosef Shraga goes to the house of the rabbi. He knows that he's constantly studying, teaching. He doesn't want to waste his time, so he prays right before he enters the door, please HaShem, bring the right words into the mouth of Rav Tzion Abba Shaul, that whatever he says, that's what you want. If he wants me to teach, then I'll teach. If you don't want me to teach, I won't teach. Whatever he says, I'm going to do. He goes inside, and he says to the Rav, sorry to bother you, just take a few moments of your time. Because he was studying. He said, yes, sure, what do you need? And Rav Shraga tells him, they asked me to teach some shurim of your Gemara, and I wanted to see if the rabbi agrees for me to teach. And Rav Tzion Abba Shaul says, yes, of course. Go ahead and do it, yeah. Chazak ve'ematz. Baruch Hashem, thank you very much, Kvod Rav. And he already turned around to go. As he got to the door, he put his hand on the handle, and all of a sudden the Rav turns around, the Rav Tzion Abba Shaul says his voice, says, of Yosef. And of course, once you get that second before you go, you already know, uh-oh, what happened now? Turns around and says, yes, Kvod Rav. Rav Yosef, so in this shiurim, you're going to teach the malacha too, huh? Yes, Kvod Rav. I mean, Masechet Brachot is what we're going to start. And there's plenty of halacha lemaaseh, plenty of practical halacha in there that we have to teach. He says, but you know that I paskin differently than Rav Ovadia in many places. So who are you going to go with? Whose psak are you going to teach? Rav Shraga says, if the ground could open up and swallow me at that moment, I preferred that already. What are you going to do? This is my Rav, and this is Rav Ovadia, the Gdol Ador, Rishon LeZion. What do you do? Immediately Rav Shraga says, bows his head, he goes, Kvod Rav, I'm your Talmid. Publicize your psak. No matter what, we publicize what your psak is. Of course, the basic foundation everybody has is the same, but the way to fulfill certain mitzvot is sometimes different between poskim. And Rav Shraga says, I'm going to teach your shita, your ways. And surprise of all surprises, Rav Tzion Abba Shaul looks at his Talmid and he says, and you're going to go against Rav Ovadia Yosef? He says, if the ground can swallow me again, for sure I'm jumping in this time. He says, but Kvod Rav, but you went against him. And I'm going with you. He says, but you are me? Rav Shraga, Vaidom Aaron, doesn't know what to say. But I don't know. What do you do? Okay, no? Yes? He says, although I disagree on certain things with Rav Ovadia, you go teach Am Yisrael what Rav Ovadia paskind. That's what you teach. That's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants. It's not about my opinion versus his opinion. It's what Am Yisrael needs. And you have to go teach what Rav Ovadia Yosef taught. How he pasked. This, Rabotai Karim, is Chasidut. This is four walls. Nobody knows. Nobody's convincing the rabbi to do anything. He could easily command his Talmid to teach only his way, his shita, his psak. After all, it's his Talmid. And if not, he could simply just stay quiet, not say anything. Whatever he teaches, it teaches. But he makes sure that his Talmid knows. Don't ever get confused. Yes, I paskin different on this or that, but you have to go teach what Maran, Rav Ovadia Yosef, is teaching. That's what you have to teach. Why? That's what Am Yisrael needs to know. That's what Am Yisrael needs to know. When a person cares only about the will of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that means that their will, their desires, their anything is removed from the equation completely, and only the will of HaShem is there. And that means, Rabotai, not just the basics of what's expected of you, but even more so. And the more a person is looking to sanctify HaKadosh Baruch Hu's name, the more a person is looking to live sanctifying HaKadosh Baruch Hu's name, the more they'll become a precious tool that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has in this world that is fulfilling the purpose, which is to glorify the name of God. Now, when it came to this mitzvah, we saw from the Rambam, it's a positive mitzvah, meaning that if there is a situation where there's some tyrant, some crusade, some Nazi that's threatening us to abandon God or else we die, we know that we have to die. But we don't have to go look for crusades just to die. That's not what the mitzvah says, meaning you don't have to look for opportunities to sanctify God's name. The mitzvah is, do it when you can. But if you want to fulfill the midat Chasidut, then you start looking for it. And for that, Rabotai, we also see the answer to our question about Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu was commanded by God to speak to the stone. Moshe Rabbeinu, after the annoyance of Am Yisrael complaining and threatening and yelling and being very, very obnoxious in every way, shape, or form, especially led by the Erev Rav that inspired all of this hatred, Moshe Rabbeinu makes the mistake of hitting. Now, after all, the purpose of getting the water out was achieved, but that was not really the purpose. You see, HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, I want you to speak to them, speak to the stone and not hit the stone. Why? Because you already hit the stone in the past and water came out. Now, if you hit the stone again, Am Yisrael is not going to learn anything from that. They're not going to learn anything from that. They're just going to think, oh, so Moshe Rabbeinu has this trick, or God has this limited miracle that if you hit the stone, water comes out. They're not going to learn anything from that. But if you speak to the stone, then Am Yisrael, that has a clever mind, a precious neshama and a clever mind, is going to see, wait a minute, look, this stone is a stone, but yet it's fulfilling the words that Moshe Rabbeinu is saying. It's fulfilling the commandment that Moshe Rabbeinu is saying to it. We have a flesh heart. We don't have a stone heart. Meaning we should also listen to Moshe Rabbeinu and follow the ways of HaShem. But you didn't do that, Moshe. You didn't do that. You hit the stone, and therefore we lost the opportunity for Am Yisrael to learn. We lost the opportunity for Am Yisrael to learn, to do tshuva. We lost the opportunity for Am Yisrael to have another reason to sanctify my name as a result of their desire. Meaning, you lost the opportunity to sanctify my name. And because you lost the opportunity to sanctify my name, you cannot enter the land of Israel, that its entire place, a full land, is all sanctification of God's name. The entire land of Israel is one big Kiddush HaShem. And as a measure for measure punishment, because you lost the opportunity to sanctify my name, you cannot enter a place that's full of Kiddush HaShem. Now, are we obligated in the same level as Moshe Rabbeinu? No. But when you're a tzaddik, HaKadosh Baruch Hu judges them even for small things that to us is not even an obligation. At the hairbreadth, small things, things that you wouldn't even imagine. Now again, we're not tzadikim. We're not even the shoelace that Moshe Rabbeinu used. But yet at the same token, we have an opportunity to fulfill the same mitzvot as Moshe Rabbeinu. And even mitzvot that Moshe Rabbeinu couldn't do because we can go to Eretz Yisrael. Either way, whether you live in the exile or you live in Eretz Yisrael, you have an opportunity to sanctify Kadosh Baruch Hu's name. Perhaps you'll do it once and then forget about it. Maybe you'll do it twice and then forget about it. Maybe you'll do it once a day for a week and then forget about it. Maybe you'll do it every day. Either way, it was all worth it. Why? Because if a person comes into this world and just sanctifies HaKadosh Baruch Hu's name, just one time, all of the creation and all of history and all of the agony and all of the pain and all of the trials and tribulations that have ever happened into the world become worth it. Which means, Rabotai Yekarim, if any one of you that's watching this right now, after you watch this, you take an action to sanctify God's name. You could do it for free by thinking about the things that Rabbi Elimelech of Lizhensk said, dying on Kedusha HaShem. Or you could do it by supporting Kiruv, helping us continue publicizing this holy Torah. Either way, you'll be sanctifying a Kadosh Baruch Hu's name. And for that, it wasn't only worth it to have this shiur, to study, to go through all types of trials and tribulations to get to this point. Much more than that. It was worth it for HaKadosh Baruch Hu to create the whole creation just for that. Isn't that amazing? Ishtabach Shemo La'ad. Thank you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, for giving us the opportunity to sanctify your extraordinary name, your holy name. And BeEzrat HaShem will be matzliach in sanctifying your name, in publicizing your name, and in encouraging others to do the same. Thank you very much for learning with me. BeEzrat HaShem, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will bless each and every single one of you with a life full of Kiddush Hashem. Anyone that wants to help us continue sanctifying HaKadosh Baruch Hu's name and become a partner with us in sanctifying HaKadosh Baruch Hu's name, you could donate at bhtorah.org or beezrathashem.org or many other places that you could donate by sending a check or contacting us in other ways. Either way, may HaKadosh Baruch Hu bless you, and BeEzrat HaShem will continue to learn again later this week. Kol Tov, Bracha v'Hatzlacha.
כותב שם הרמב"ם, וכאשר יפקפק האדם ביסוד מאלה היסודות, אפילו לא כולם, אפילו אחד מי"ג עיקרים, תראו את הלשון, זה לא אנחנו אומרים, זה ברמב"ם, הרי זה יצא מן הכלל וכפר בעיקר ונקרא מין ואפיקורוס וקוצץ בנטיעות וחובה לשנותו ולהשמידו, זה לשון הרמב"ם, ועליו הוא אומר, הלא משנאך השם אשנא, תכלית שנאה שנאתים. אנחנו חס ושלום לא אומרים לקנטר, לא רוצים שאף אחד ינזק, רוצים בטובתם של עם ישראל, אבל צריך לדעת שהטובה האמיתית זה לדעת את האמת. שלום וברכה לכל הציבור הקדוש, לכל המאזינים, לכל השומעים. אנחנו בעזרת השם רוצים ביחד לעורר ולהתעורר בדבר מאוד מאוד חשוב שעוררו עליו קצת הרבנים וצריכים עוד לעורר. יש יהודי בארצות הברית בשם מניס פרידמן.
בנושא הספר לא ביקשתי לבוא לעולם, והקו המרכזי של המחבר, הקו הנורא זה שחס ושלום אלוקים לא צריך אותנו, אנחנו לא צריכים אותו, שזה דבר שהוא נגד עיקרי האמונה. עוד אמירות שהוא אומר בסרטונים המופצים, אף אחד לא יענש, גם אם הוא יעשה כל דבר, יהודי לא יענש היום אחרי הגלות הנוראה.
Today, because of how long the Golus has gone on, there isn't a Jew in the world who deserves punishment, no matter what he does.
לצערנו זה כפירה בעיקרי האמונה. אנחנו צריכים להבין שכל העונשים והכללות המובאות בתורה, בפרט פרשת בחוקותיי, פרשת השבוע, פרשת כי תבוא גם כן, השורש של כל זה זה אהבה ורחמים גמורים של הקדוש ברוך הוא לעם ישראל. הכללות הם לא איומים, נמחיש את הדברים. אבא הולך עם הבן שלו בגיל 3 ליד כביש סואן. האבא אוחז ביד הבן, כל רגע הבן מנסה להשתחרר ולרוץ לכביש. האבא אוחז עוד יותר, הבן מצליח להשתחרר רגע אחד, רץ לכביש. האבא תופס אותו, אומר לו, אם עוד פעם אחת אתה עוזב אותי ורץ לכביש, אני נותן לך מכות שלא חלמת. והבן נרגע, הבן מפחד ולא הולך. אבל מה הוא אומר לו? אני לא ביקשתי להיוולד, לא ביקשתי לבוא, אתה הולדת אותי, אתה צריך אותי. אל תאיים עליי במכות, שחרר אותי. הבן צודק, האבא כולו רחמים, הוא מפחד על הבן שלו, הוא מאיים עליו במכות כדי שהוא לא ימות. ככה הקדוש ברוך הוא אומר, אם בחוקותיי תמאסו ואת משפטיי תיגע נפשכם, אני אתן לכם מכות כאלה שלא חלמתם. כל מכה שאינה כתובה בספר התורה הזה יעלם השם. למה? כי כל זה רחמים, הקדוש ברוך הוא רוצה בטובתנו. איך אפשר לומר שהוא צריך אותנו ואנחנו לא צריכים אותו?
אהוביי וידידיי, נדרשתי עוד פעם לסוגיה הכואבת הזאת, אודות הכפירה של הכופר מניס פרידמן. כן, הוא נראה רע ויש לו זקן ארוך לבן, אבל לצערנו לא פעם תפסנו אותו על דברי כפירה, ולצערנו שוב פעם ושוב פעם הוא חוזר על ההגיגים השפלים שלו. אני אגיד לכם כמה מהפרומואים שלו. אלוקים יכול לחטוא, ואז הוא ממציא איזה דבר להוכיח איך אלוקים יכול לחטוא. העונג שהעולם נותן לו לאלוקים מצדיק את הכאב, כאילו לאלוקים יש כאב ויש לו עונג. אלוקים אומר אני צריך אנשים, הוא אומר אני צריך אנשים. ממשיך ואומר שיש לאלוקים יד וזרוע, ואתה הוא המשל של אלוקים.
The Eibishter has a real arm. Ein mikra yetze midei pshutei. If Torah says the Eibishter's arm, then he has an arm. Don't turn the Torah into a fairy tale. The Eibishter has an arm, a real arm, a literal arm. Mamish an arm. You mean like mine? No. You don't have a real arm.
זאת אומרת, יד השם וכו', אתה המשל ואלוקים הוא באמת היד האמיתית. כן, יש לו יד וכו' וכו'. כל מיני דברים כאלו. אם אנחנו נזכור נראה שהוא עובר על כמה וכמה מדברי רבותינו. אני אגיד לכם את זה עם המקורות. אפשר לגבי מה שהוא אומר, אלוקים צריך אותנו.
The Eibishter needs you.
יש פסוק באיוב, החקר אלוה תמצא, אם התכלית שדי תמצא. זאת אומרת, אי אפשר לבוא ולהבין את האלוקים. אתה רוצה לחקור, להבין, איך נראה, איך זה. הרמב"ם בהלכות יסודי התורה בפרק א' הלכה ג' כותב שכל הנמצאים צריכים לו יתברך, והוא ברוך הוא אינו צריך להם. מפורש ברמב"ם בהלכות יסודי התורה פרק א' הלכה ג', הפוך ממה שאומר ודורש, ועל זה הוא בנה את הקריירה שלו, אדון מניס פרידמן. הרמב"ם בהלכות תשובה בפרק ג' הלכה ז' קורא שיש 5 הם הנקראים מינים. אחד מהחמישה הללו האומר שיש שם ריבון אחד, אבל שהוא גוף ובעל תמונה. זאת אומרת, אם אתה אומר שמה שכתוב בתורה, יד, רגל, כל הדברים האלו ביד חזקה, בזרוע נטויה אתה חושב שזה כפשוטם, שבאמת יש לו משהו כזה, כן, יש לו כמו שאומר מניס, אז האדם הזה הוא בחזקת מין. זה מה שכותב הרמב"ם, הלכות תשובה, פרק ג' הלכה ז'.
בדברים מפורשים, שכאשר יהיו קיימים לאדם כל היסודות הללו ואמונתו בהם אמיתית, הרי הוא נכלל בכלל ישראל, ורק עליו נאמר כל ישראל יש להם חלק לעולם הבא. רק עליו זה נאמר. כותב שם הרמב"ם, וכאשר יפקפק אדם ביסוד מאלה היסודות, אפילו לא כולם, אפילו אחד מי"ג עיקרים. תראו את הלשון, זה לא אנחנו אומרים, זה ברמב"ם. הרי זה יצא מן הכלל וכפר בעיקר ונקרא מין ואפיקורוס וקוצץ בנטיעות וחובה לסנותו ולהשמידו, זה לשון הרמב"ם. ועליו הוא אומר הלא משנאך השם אשנא, תכלית שנאה שנאתים. אנחנו חס ושלום לא אומרים לקטר, לא רוצים שאף אחד ינזק, רוצים בטובתם של עם ישראל, אבל צריך לדעת שהטובה האמיתית זה לדעת את האמת. אדם שלא יודע את האמת, אדם שלא שומע בכל חכמי התורה האמיתיים, הרב פלדמן בארצות הברית, אף אחד לא מערער שהוא מגדולי התורה בעולם.
He's an amoritz. He means well. He's a very, very, very nice person, probably. Means well, he speaks well, he loves people. But to teach people that there's no Averis anymore, he's Shekov. It's Apikusis. There's no Averis. What about the whole Torah? It tells about Yom Shumat, Yishma Mitzvah. Sati Mitaratz Chambita Yeramaku. He doesn't say Kriyashma every day. He says there's no Schar B'Inish nowadays.
מורנו הרב אפרים כחלון, תלמיד חכם אמיתי, צדיק, שקדן, מדקדק בכל דבר כמו שצריך. הוא קרא את כל הספר של האדם הזה, והוא אומר שיש שם הרבה כפירות. אנחנו גם ראינו חלק מהדברים, איך הוא מדבר, דברי שרה, וזה דברים שאסור להעביר אותם לסדר היום. צריך לדעת שכל מי שהוא מחנויות הספרים בארץ מי שיש לו חנות ספרים, שהוא יכניס את הספרים של האדם הזה, הוא בכלל מחטיאה רבים. בכלל מחטיאה רבים. הוא מסייע למי שעליו נאמר, כל המגלה פנים בתורה, אין לו חלק לעולם הבא. ואין לו תשובה, כתוב שם במסכת יומא, מגלה פנים בתורה שלא כהלכה, אם הוא לא יחזור, אין דבר שיחפר עליו. אפילו לפי רבי, רבנו הקדוש, עיצומו של יום הכיפורים מחפר, גם בלא תשובה, אבל מי שהוא מגלה פנים בתורה שלא כהלכה, הוא חייב בעצמו לפשפש במעשיו, ואנחנו מחויבים להתרחק ממנו כמתחווה קשת.
And the Baal HaTanya says that if a person is trying to get there but still not there, as long as he's trying, he's still on the right path, eventually he's going to get there. But if he thinks, if he's deluding himself that fear is bad, like this man is Santa Claus thinks, or some of the other people say that fear is not good, Gehenom is not good, scaring people is not good, all types of mumbo jumbo that their philosopher heads are creating, the Baal HaTanya, the head of Chabad, one of the greatest Chassidim in history, says someone that thinks they could purely just love Hashem is not doing anything at all. It's not serving Hashem, serving something else. Why? Because there is no such thing as a servant that's not afraid of his master. No such thing. And this is pure logic. You can even call it rational. And BeEzrat Hashem, it's emet. Yiratzon, that each and every single one of the people that ever listened to that mumbo jumbo that's distorting the true Torah of Am Yisrael will listen to these holy words and do tshuva, get closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and serve Him as HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells us to serve Him.
בסייעתא דשמיא, בית דין צדק לממונות, בעזרת השם, Shabbat Eve, Parashat Bechukotai, 5784. Manifesto. Since our Rabbi, the Rambam, wrote in his commentary on the Mishnah in Sanhedrin, chapter 10, Halacha 1, that when a person disputes even just one of the foundations of the Torah, then he steps out of the circle of our people and denies the essence of our faith. He is called a heretic, an anapikoros, and one who uproots the saplings of our beliefs. We saw fit to reveal our Torah opinion, Da'at Torah, to publish publicly about the man called Manis Friedman, and the fruit of his thought, the book, I Did Not Ask to Be Born. According to what we have examined, there are blasphemy and heresies in his words, which go against the 13 principles of faith, which are the foundations of the entire Torah. We were very saddened when we heard in his words things that are exactly the opposite of what the Rambam wrote in Ilchot Yesodei Torah, chapter 1, Halacha 3, and the commentary on the Mishnah in Masechet Sanhedrin, chapter 10, Halacha 1. Because all of the entities require him, and he, blessed be he, does not need them, nor any one of them. For he is not dependent on any being other than himself. We have also heard how the aforementioned denies the belief in the 11th foundation of the foundations of the Torah, that he pays a good reward to those who observe the mitzvot of the Torah and punishes those who transgress its prohibitions. We have also heard that in his words he gives a place of honor to those who forsake the Torah and their abominations, about which King Solomon, peace be upon him, already said, those who forsake the Torah will praise the wicked. Therefore, there is an absolute obligation upon all Jewish people to avoid hearing his sermons or reading his books. And we sign this as a humble addition to what has already been publicized by the member of Moetzet Gdolei Torah in the USA, the great Gaon, Rabbi Yaron Feldman Shlita, that people must stay away and protest against the invalid ideologies of the aforementioned, signing in sorrow and out of concern for Klal Yisrael in all their settlements. Arav Yaakov Zamir, Arav Ephraim Kachlon, Arav Shlomo Shlarvit, Arav Tzvi Didi, Arav Yaron Reuven.
בסייעתא דשמיא, בית דין צדק לממונות, בעזרת השם, ערב שבת קודש לסדרים בחוקותיי תלכו תשפ"ד. גילוי דעת. הנה היות שכתב רבנו הרמב"ם בפירוש המשנה, פרק י' מסנהדרין משנה א', שכאשר יפקפק אדם, אפילו רק באחד מיסודות התורה, הרי זה יצא מן הכלל וכפר בעיקר, ונקרא מין ואפיקורוס וקוצץ בנטיות. ראינו לנכון לגלות דעתנו דעת תורה, ולפרסם בשער בת רבים אודות האיש הנקרא מאנס פרידמן, ופרי הגותו הספר לא ביקשתי לבוא בעולם. שכפי מה שבדקנו יש בדבריו דברי בלע ואפיקורסות, החותרים נגד י"ג עיקרי האמונה שהם יסוד התורה כולה. והצטערנו מאוד כששמענו בדבריו דברים הנשמעים כהפך ממש למה שכתב הרמב"ם בהלכות יסודי התורה, פרק א' הלכה ג' ופירוש המשנה בסנהדרין פרק י' משנה א', שכל הנמצאים צריכים לא יתברך, והוא ברוך הוא אינו צריך להם ולא לאחד מהם, כי הוא יתעלה בלתי זקוק במציאותו לזולתו. וכן שמענו איך הנזכר לאל מכחיש את האמונה ביסוד ה-11 מיסודי התורה, שהוא יתעלה משלם גמול טוב למי שמקיים מצוות התורה ומעניש מי שעובר על עזרותיה. וכן שמענו שנותן בדבריו מקום של כבוד לעוזבי התורה ותועבותיהם, כבר אמר שלמה המלך עליו השלום, עוזבי תורה יעללו רשע. ולכן מוטלת חובה גמורה על כל איש ישראל להימנע מלשמוע את דרשותיו או לקרוא בספריו. והרינו חותמים בזה כי יהודה ועוד לקרא, למה שכבר נודע בשער בת רבים על ידי חבר מועצת גדולי התורה בארצות הברית, הגאון הגדול רבי ירון פלדמן שליטה, שיש להתרחק ולמחות כנגד דעותיו הפסולות של הנזכר לאל. החותמים בצער ומתוך דאגה לכלל ישראל בכל מקומות מושבותיהם, הרב יעקב זמיר, הרב אפרים כחלון, הרב שלמה שרביט, הרב צבי דידי, הרב ירון ראובן.
אני מברך את הרבנים, הרב ירון ראובן, הרב אפרים כחלון, ראשי ארגון בעזרת השם, שהלכו בפי עליון, שעלו מעלה מעלה, יהיה להם ברכה והצלחה, הקדוש ברוך הוא ימלא בישועות ליבם לטובה ולברכה, שבכל מה שיפנו ישכילו ויצליחו, יזכו לעשות כאלה וכאלה, הודיעו תורה לאדירה, אמן ואמן.